So Jennifer, let me see you play the flams and the flam taps with Moeller integration.
Okay. Oh, one bit, two. Yeah, I feel something.
So there's a little bit of this movement. I'm exaggerating it. There's
on the right.
Lateral movement on the right. Yeah, I'm using my left just because it's that's
right.
But yeah, and that now the angles are also important in terms of how you're seeing yourself, right? I'm not exactly lined up as well as you are with your camera. Let me see if I could move that a little bit over. It might be a little bit better, but still not great. So, but there's a little bit of with the right, there's a little bit of a side thing happening.
Oh, okay. So like a swinging motion. Yeah,
swing is the right word, which is interesting because you might, I think we might have talked about this in the past where like you might go to a jazz club, or maybe it was my other student, or, where we were talking about this Moeller-esque stuff, where if you go to a jazz club, you see a lot of jazz drummers playing with that side movement, lateral thing, because it is part of a lot of jazz musicians do that because it's really part of how they do brushwork, and then that brushwork comes into their. Because it kind of adds. I'm exaggerating it right now, right? But it kind of comes into some of their playing. Not all jazz musicians, just certain jazz musicians. If you want to look up one, Sherry Miracle is her name, and it's really apparent. You can check her out on YouTube. She's a great drummer. She's amazing, but she's definitely got this thing happening in her playing. And but I just want to point it out because if we don't necessarily if we're not playing jazz, and B, if it's not our intention, we just want to keep it. We want to keep it up in this plane.
Okay.
Right? This plane. We don't want to get into that plane. We just want to keep it in this. Forget what that's called from an anatomical standpoint, right? So that's the in Tai Chi that would be it right there. Well, probably called something in Tai Chi. I don't know. As opposed to now that's I'm exaggerating it with both hands, and also my flams are getting loose.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's starting to fall apart as I.
Well, yeah. Again, it's a stylistic thing, and it's when you're swinging. There's some utility to it, but I think for learning it from foundational aspect. Look at your left and be like, oh, that's what we want, right? It's happening. I think it might be happening more. Now, these are really open flams, almost like right there, really open flams. Open meaning like there's a lot of space between the grace note and the primary note. So it probably tends to happen more in the flams because there's a tendency in the movement, right, to kind of be a little like that with it, yeah. So I think that's what's going on. So if we I think what's going to help is think your torso really relaxed, but not so much shifty. Okay. We want to keep it stable. We want to keep it stable. Not stable to the point where you're not breathing. But stable to the point where your arms and your hands and your fingers are leading the work for these flams. Yeah.
So more straightforward, straight ahead instead of
Yeah,
side to side.
I mean, well, it's not, don't think straight because there's really nothing straight in our anatomy.
Well, I mean this way instead of this way.
Well, right. It's just, right. We don't want that. We just want your arm moving up and down, but it's still going to drop and it's still going to come out. Like, some teachers don't like the elbows coming out when you're doing Moeller, but they're going to come out a little bit, because if they don't come out, then you have to prevent them from coming out. Because what happens is when you do that drop, right? When you do that drop, my arm is going to come away from my torso, right? And the movement kind of leads from the elbow. You can think of it leading from the elbow. Actually, it's probably leading from like the shoulder blade even, or like even closer to your neck area where you get that impulse, because the shoulder blade is involved in this movement. The shoulder joint is involved, and we don't really have, let's see. We do have some elbow joint movement. Not a ton, but it's there, right? When you drop, there's going to be some flexion of this elbow joint, right? So when you drop, the shoulder joint, the arm comes away from the torso. As opposed to something, now I'm exaggerating, as opposed to something like that. Or something. Sometimes people kind of overcompensate this. They watch that Jojo Mayer video, and then all of a sudden they're kind of overcompensating. Kind of, the Moeller's kind of looking like that, which is a little bit.
You know what it reminds me? It's kind of like baseball, like when they throw sidearm. It's almost like a, what I mean?
Right.
Instead of straight across, and don't throw it from
It's almost like if you had water on your hands. Jimmy Chapin used this analogy a lot. If you had water on your hands and you're flicking the water off, you would just simply do it like that, right?
Yeah.
Or if you had a softball in your hand and you were bouncing the softball really hard on the floor for it to come back to you, you would just bounce it straight down on the floor, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't side swap it, because if you side swapped it, the softball wouldn't come back to you, right? That might happen if you have a yo-yo in your hand, but with just a regular softball or a tennis ball, you want to think, if you're throwing that down, you want to think that tennis ball coming right back into your hand, right? And now the only difference is we're putting the drumstick in our hand and we're doing that same thinking, right? It's just going to come right back to where it started, right back to where it started. And I remember the other thing that Jimmy Chapin used to say was that it's like you shouldn't really see, he's like, you should see the fingers. You shouldn't really see the palm of your hand, because that means maybe you're overcompensating, right? Or you're doing too much movement to that elbow. And I don't know, I guess that's, again, that might be like what Jojo Mayer teaches from like going that whole, what he was saying. Well, I guess he was saying what was he saying? What was Jimmy Chapin saying there? I'd have to kind of think about that. I think what he was saying was maybe it's not that. You see what I'm doing? It's that, which looks more like Tai Chi to me than that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, so I think that might help you. Obviously some of that is off the cuff just now, so I'd have to really kind of think about like why did Jimmy Chapin say that? Maybe review some of those notes that I took when I took those scoop classes with him. Also might be in his videos. I just remember him saying that you should just see the fingers. You shouldn't see the palm of your hand when you're doing a downstroke. or an upstroke, because upstrokes and downstrokes are pretty much the same thing, right? A downstroke is like an upstroke, except you're not allowing the stick to touch the pad. Right, and taps, obviously with taps, you're not going, you're not gonna be like this. So you're just gonna see, if you're looking in the mirror, you're just gonna see your fingers and the sticks in this position, facing each other, angled in towards each other. So I think that even though my explanations aren't great right now, I can get a little more clear on this from an anatomical perspective, and I will continue to explore it. But I think you get it, because now when I see you doing it, I don't see you doing as much. Now when we're doing that full downstroke, the full traditional Moeller downstroke, what I want you to do is allow that stick to come up back to starting position. Yeah.